Hi there, and thank you for tuning in to The Social Circus, where every week we dive into a variety of topics covering social media, mindset, and how to run your business. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Social Circus. I am your host, Sarah Thompson, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Kara Stokes. Now, Kara is an SEO copywriter, and she really specializes in health and fitness brands and helps them create strong, fresh, and attention-grabbing messages. If you want captivating email campaigns, click-worthy sales pages, or SEO content, she'll get the words working harder for you so you've got more time to do the things that you love. She is a healthy living buff. Her favorite types of exercise are resistance training, yoga, and swimming at her local beach. Welcome, Kara.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Oh, look, I'm absolutely thrilled to have you on. I know that you're on two really hot topics, SEO and copywriting. They're always hard subjects, aren't they?
They are, definitely. SEO can be a bit of a minefield for people. It's kind of one of those ones, if you like, you open it up and it never stops.
No, it is a big can of worms. So I always love to ask my guests just to kind of let people get to know you a little bit beyond your formal bio. Tell me a little bit about your journey into being an entrepreneur and starting your own business.
Sure. Well, it was a combination of quite a few things, really. I'd been a stay-at-home mum for a long time. I took time off work. And before that, I never really enjoyed any job that I did. But I had actually done lots of different aspects that I didn't realize were copywriting. I never knew what copywriting was, that it had a term, but I'd actually been already doing it in lots of different roles. So I've been a writer since I was like 9 years old. I've written books. I studied writing straight out of high school. I wanted to be J.K. Rowling's. Didn't happen. So, you got to earn money somehow. So I did a whole heap of different things. And then I needed work that would fit around my kids. I wanted flexibility, and I just couldn't imagine going back to working for someone else. I wanted to be in my own role where I was helping people in the best way that I could be. I'd never found that before. So I kind of rolled into this copywriting thing, and here I am almost 5 years later.
Wow. Although I love hearing that, because I think so many of us are driven to start our own business when we have a family and we realize that our workplaces are not the family friendly spaces that we were hoping for.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And just the flexibility, you can pop up for kids events. I can shuffle my hours and be around when they need me. And it also works for the clients too. It works.
Absolutely. And I know I've been in business for a long time now. And when I started my business, my children were 3 and 5. They're now 14 and 17. So they've only ever known really the world where mum and dad work at home. And I love that. Looking back, I'm really proud that we created a business that allowed us to be present and, like you say, attend those things. And I remember in my early days being quite embarrassed about working part-time around my children. And it was as I got more confident and I realized that the people who thought that was weird were not my ideal customers. So it's also a nice journey to kind of, like you say, it works for your clients. I still remember messaging a client of mine who was at the time one of my biggest clients, and I said to her, do you mind if I move our appointment because my son's getting an award? And she wrote back and she said, this is why we do what we do, Sarah. I've always run my business around my children. And she's been in business for 25 years. And I just went, oh my gosh, those are my people.
Yeah, it's awesome, isn't it? And it means they get the best of you. I think that's what I love about it the most, is because I have the flexibility, particularly because I'm in a creative role. I can shut down when it's not working. I don't have to be forced to sit there and just pump it out. I can go, no, this is not the hour to get this done. Obviously I have deadlines and things like that, but I can go and do a gym workout, have a cup of tea, refresh, get some space, come back, and all of a sudden the words will flow and then the clients get the best stuff. But if I sat in an office, in the CBD 8 to 5, I guarantee only 2 of those hours would be excellent work. The rest would just be fluff.
Oh, and isn't that an interesting mindset shift? It took me a long time to realize that I could work how I wanted to work. And I was one of those people, because I was a little like a corporate automaton. And so when I started my own business, I kind of felt like I had to still do that many hours. And it's taken me years to realize that I can work at my optimal self and I can take time off when I want to. It's a big lesson. It sounds like you've got a much better handle on it than me.
I think I kind of had it even when I was in corporate. I kind of knew I've always been really fast at whatever I do. So I would sit there in any job and I'd whiz through it and then I'd be bored for the rest of the day. And whereas now it's actually like, well, I can do the other bits. I'll do a bit of client work, I'll do the social media. It really suits my kind of personality that whatever I'm feeling at the moment, I can flip to that and everything somehow gets done.
Oh, I love it. Awesome. So let's jump in and talk a little bit about copywriting, because that's why I've got you on today. I could talk about being a woman balancing a life all day.
I know.
But let's talk about copywriting, because that's a space that is, I think, a lot of my audience find really, really challenging. So you said you've always been a writer and always enjoyed that. So when you're working like with your clients, what are some of the things you find that come up as common challenges?
There's probably at least 2, maybe 3 points. One of the first one is the perspective flip. So especially for starting up businesses, the first thing we do is talk to people about us, and it's very we focused. So we do this, we are awesome, come buy from us. When you change that to you will get this when you work with us. That's a really powerful change. And once people wrap their head around that, the copy and the content that they create it just transforms, and it resonates with the reader, and they get so much more engagement, because instead of just pumping out the message of all the features, and this is a huge thing in copywriting, you've got your features. So say if you're a personal trainer, your feature might be air conditioning. If you're in a hot climate, it might be your dog that comes in and gives them snuggles. It might be short workouts for mums. And they're all the good things that you do, but you got to talk about how it actually benefits them. So once you start to see what the benefits are and come from their perspective, what their problem is, and switching that around and talking about that first, then they pay attention to what the features are. And it can be quite a head flip. Some people take a little bit to kind of, but we just need to talk about, my beautiful micro needling massage, appointments, because they're just all these wonderful things that they'll get from it. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's awesome. But honestly, and I have to be a bit blunt, the audience doesn't care unless it's actually about them. So whatever we put out, they really do not care unless you're talking to them and the problem that they've got. So once we kind of get our heads around that, it makes a massive difference.
Oh, I love that. So what were your other couple of thoughts? You said that flipping that from
the perspective.
we I to you. It's a wonderful tip. Thank you. And what were your other thoughts?
That's a really powerful one. And following on from that would be having a conversation like we are now. Every time you're writing, you're having a one-to-one conversation. So if anyone has done a university degree or had a really full-on high school teacher that loved the long essays and things like that, you get stuck in that academic style of writing, and that's not what business is about. Or even in corporate, they love officious language, sustainable, maintainable, all that sort of stuff. Ditch it. It's not the place for it. When you're writing, you've got to write one-to-one, as if you're sitting across the table from someone in a cafe, not a mate, because that would be too close. You get a bit too chummy and you might let your guard down a bit too much, but a friend of a friend, like an acquaintance that you're introducing yourself to, you're telling them a bit about things. So it becomes much more relaxed. And really, helps with the engagement, because you're not talking at them, you're talking to them, and you're opening up for questions and for them to, resonate with it and say, oh, yes, that's me, I get that. And, oh, I had that yesterday. I'm so glad you talked about it, those sorts of things.
I love that tip, Kara, on that conversational tone, because I've done a fair bit of study. I've just finished my master's last year, and I genuinely struggled, even though I love study and I love academia. I've been in that space now, particularly in social media, it's very casual, isn't it? So I've been in that space of writing casual content. And then when I wrote my first essay, I was like, oh, I'm not allowed to use I or we or any kind of any of those kind of naming acronyms. And it was really, really interesting to kind of step back from that. It actually took me months to get back into that habit of that academic formal writing. And I was like, oh, we just don't get to the point.
Yeah, it's very different, and it's a habit. And that's the thing with any writing, is if you really struggle with it and you're not going to pay someone else to do it, you need to invest in it and spend time doing it. It really is just a skill. So the more you build that habit, the better you get at it. So if you hate it, just sit there with the page and don't do a blank page. Give yourself a prompt. What did I eat yesterday? What was my favorite Christmas? It can be anything, but just the practice of writing makes you get better.
Yeah. Oh, good tip. So let's talk a little bit about SEO, because that is something that I feel like it just becomes another thing on our to-do list as business owners, and you just think, oh my gosh, where do I start?
Yeah.
So can you give me a little definition of what is SEO for a start?
Sure. So search engine optimization. So it's all about making your website in particular, but you can use it in other search engines. Instagram is a search engine, YouTube is a search engine, but we'll talk about Google just to simplify it a bit. So it's all about making your website easy to be found by Google and by people. So it's actually a combination of the two. Sometimes people think it's just the technical stuff, but the number one rule with SEO is to write for people first and for Google and its search engine algorithms second. So it's about using keywords and some of the more technical things like, how fast your page loads and, JavaScript and all these other kind of things. It's a big topic.
It is. But from a copywriting perspective, where would you even start with SEO? Like what do you give us some little tips for people?
Sure. Well, probably the first thing, if you're not doing keyword research yourself or paying someone to do it, is just to think about what people would be putting into Google to find you. So a classic example I get is I work with personal trainers, and a lot of them, when they're at a certain level, distinguish themselves from every other PT out there because, let's face it, it is a crowded industry. They call themselves coaches. And that's awesome, and I'm all for it. But the average Joe and Sally are pumping personal trainer, Brisbane, personal trainer Tasmania, into Google to find them. So I have to tell them, if you want to be found on your website, we are going to have to use the phrases personal trainer, even though you want to be called a coach. Same thing with sometimes there might be a gym, but they want to be called a studio. And it's like, well, people might look up Pilates studio. They might not look up resistance training studio. They might just look up local gym. So it's a matter of thinking about what words they're actually thinking about when they're looking for you. And often it's not what you would call your stuff.
So interesting, isn't it? And it's I over the last few days I've had some really fun conversations with some of my clients about what do we call ourselves. And it is incredibly difficult to put a label on a lot of, especially I guess we're in this emerging industry space. So I would have probably 20 years ago been called a business coach and now I call myself like a digital marketing coach, and I am actually both, I guess. And I try not to get too caught up in it, but when I do the keyword research, so many people are looking for specifics like Facebook marketing. And so I have optimized my website for specific terms rather than those big umbrella terms. And obviously I found that to be really good, but it's quite daunting, that keyword search, isn't it?
It can be. And that's where getting specific is the key. So the more you can drill it down, you start, if you use, like, say, a short tail keyword, as we call them. So if you just, want to be found for socks, you've got no hope. There are a million sock brands out there, and there are big ones with massive marketing agencies that you're competing against. But if you sell purple socks with pink butterflies, there is a very specific audience that is going to be looking for that, and you optimize a page for it, you've got a much better chance of getting found. So they're the long tail keywords. So the more specific you are, so Facebook marketing ads, and you might have things like Facebook marketing ad spend, different things like that. The longer you can sort of stretch it out, the more chance you've got of getting found. So it's about, again, answering that specific problem that they have. And that's where that perspective flip comes into it, because we're not focusing on getting found for our services. We're focusing on getting found for what they actually need.
Ooh, that was a very juicy tip, Kara. So important, because it's really interesting. And I have been in marketing my entire adult life, and I still revert back to, I want to tell them what I do, and I forget to tell them how I help. It's like a constant struggle to kind of go, no, Sarah, you know better than this. And I still struggle with it, because I'm like, no, but I've got this great thing and it's going to be great. And it's like, they don't care how great it is unless I tell them how I help their problem.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a natural thing, because the first thing we do is come up with something, we go, oh, that's really awesome. And the hard part is we already know all this stuff about our business, whereas we have to understand that they often don't. They don't know all the back end or the technical things or the fantastic, terms and phrases that we do. So you do have to, in a sense, dumb it down. And, when you're writing, they say write it like a grade sort of, I think they call it a grade 6 level. It's American, but around a 12 or 13-year-old level of understanding. So unless they're actually in your industry and know the terms you're talking about, you need to then translate it into more simplified terms.
Such a good tip. I find that I really intentionally steer away from industry language, terms, acronyms, shortcuts, because it's really easy to lose people very quickly. And it also makes them feel really overwhelmed, doesn't it? From a copy perspective, they're just like, oh, she's not at my level.
Definitely. Yeah. That's it. And you want them to be able to relate to you first as a person, and then you can educate them. If you don't open that door, they won't listen.
Yeah. Oh, so interesting. So when we go to look at, so we've talked a little bit about keyword research, and then I'm on my website now. Where is a good place to start sort of reviewing my website copy? And what do you think are the couple most important pages on your website?
Well, your homepage is your number one. About pages are very underestimated. A lot of people leave them off, but they're actually the most visited page, particularly these days. If you're an ethical brand or a sustainable brand, that page has to be there because your core business values are the first thing that people are going to look at. So about pages are huge, and they're a whole nother topic, but I'll quickly go over it. They need to be a bit about you. But in terms of, again, what they're looking for. So you can drop a bit of your business background and a little bit of the story about why it's founded. But you need to sort of talk about it in a way of why you do what you do and how it helps them. So you have your core business values and your little background story and your mission and things like that. But again, it's all got to relate to how that makes you a better fit for your audience.
Oh, very, very juicy. And I've had a website my whole business journey, and it's really, really interesting how much that has changed, the trends with that. And I actually really like that we get to talk more about who I am as a person and the stuff that makes me kind of interesting and different, rather than just it being like a CV, which I think is very dry and doesn't convey any of that. Who am I? Like the human side to our business.
Yeah, it's been a fantastic switch. It makes business is relatable because, people don't connect with businesses, they connect with people. And that's what everyone's looking for now, because we're so inundated with advertising and options that if we don't feel that connection, we just won't make the choice to go with someone. And so when we open that door and build that bit of personality in, that allows people to then connect with that brand. And that's what all the big brands have done. They've built these emotional connections so that when people instantly see their logo or hear the word Coke or Nike, you feel something. It creates that emotional connection. Talking about SEO again, about the things you should look at too. The other one I want to go back to is navigation. Really important to have your navigation really simple, but also what you call your pages, the page titles and URLs, putting your keywords in there. So when your navigation, you don't want 20 things on there, have like 8 and name them what they are. Sometimes we feel like we need to get clever, but A, it's confusing for your audience, and B, you're losing a chance on keywords. So if you do, online social coaching or something like that, it's okay to call that tab online social coaching. That's a fairly long one, but you get in there with the actual what it is. Simplicity is always the way to go.
Oh, that's such a good tip. And it's really interesting because I do sometimes think that we overthink and overcomplicate our websites, and we're like, oh, this is really on trend, or it's really sexy. And I hear everyone calling themselves that. And it's like you say, that's not necessarily the language that your audience is using. And I'm definitely guilty of this because I sit too much in digital space and I follow a lot of other people in the digital world. And you see these trends coming through and you're like, if I did that, would my audience know what on earth I was talking about?
Exactly. Yep. And it is hard because you feel like you want it, you get very invested in your website. Some people are almost like it's my baby, especially if you DIYs, you spend a lot of time on it and you want it to be the best it is, and you got this opportunity to be creative and clever. But really, we have to remember our website is not for us. And as a copywriter, for me, that's really hard because I love writing. I go in there and tweak my website all the time to try and make it better. But every time I do, I have to remind myself it's not for me, it's for them to find me. And when you keep that in mind, then it takes all that stuff out of it. You don't need the clever turns of phrase. You just really need to tell them in a really compelling way who you are, what you do, and how it makes their life better.
Amazing tips, Kara. Oh my goodness, I think I could talk to you all day about this. It's so interesting. Look, thank you for being so generous in sharing some of those fantastic tips for my audience, and I hope that they're going to go and take some action. But I'm a bit like you. I'm a bit of a website tweaker, and I go in all the time. And one of the things that I do want to comment on is that I think with our websites and copy as well, I think we often get really wedded to the idea that things have to be perfect.
Yes,
yeah,
we do. And it doesn't.
And what's really, really interesting, I've worked with a copywriter several times on my website, and I've just reviewed it again this year, and I only did it 2 years ago. And when I went back to it, I said to her, there's been some shifts in the way in which we talk about people, like in terms of, that whole trend away from talking about women as girl bosses and all that kind of stuff. That language, I had some of that language on there and it felt quite uncomfortable suddenly. And 2 years ago, it seemed amazing. And it's really interesting that things shift. And I think if we can be open to looking at our website regularly and saying to myself, this works now, it doesn't have to work forever.
Yeah, exactly. It's okay to tweak little bits, and it might only be sections of it. And also it comes down to sometimes, again, like we were saying before, not necessarily following trends, but being you. If you stay as you are, and yes, we do evolve, but I think we tend to evolve slower than the trends might. So if you're very much you on your website, it might last you, say, 5 years. Whereas if you're following some of the trends on those sorts of things, yeah, every 2 years you'd want to be changing it. And sometimes that comes down to your audience. If they're all 20-somethings, you will probably need to keep updating it.
Yeah, that is so true. It's making sure it feels authentic to you and making sure it resonates with your audience are really good tips as well.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to want to talk to you all day. I think I'm going to have you back, Kara, because I would love to have you back to talk about page on our website. I think that would be really interesting for my audience. So we will get you back on the podcast. But I just want to wrap up and say thank you for generously sharing your wisdom and for giving us so many easy tips that we can action. For all of my listeners, please check out the show notes on how you can connect with Kara. She has lots of wonderful services and obviously some great socials where she gives lots of good tips. So be sure to go and check her out and follow her. Kara, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been wonderful.
Brilliant. Excellent. It's been delightful talking to you, and to all my listeners, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I will see you all the same time next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to The Social Circus. As your host, Sarah Thompson, I am thrilled that you've chosen to spend your time hanging out with me. I would be so grateful if you could spare an extra moment to go and leave me a review on your favorite podcasting platform. And if you even felt more excited, you could share my podcast with your friends who you think would get great value from it. Thanks so much again for tuning in.